Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my wrap-up video for April on the 12th of March. Yeah, it took me a wee minute or two to get here, but here we are. So I have a wee list here of 6 books, 5 of which I have here, 1 of which I don't, so you'll have to imagine that one. And I'll go through them in the order in which I read them. So first up, Priority of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. The size of that. And look what I did. Yeah, I got it used from Abe or World Books, I can't remember which. It still wasn't cheap. And when it arrived, the cover was torn and I was like, that's not good. And as I was reading it in bed, it was going like that, which was doing my nutting, so I just tore it off. Anyway, that's got nothing to do with the content of the book, but the cover. Isn't that an amazing cover? So I had the book on the shelf for 6 months, maybe a bit longer, and as Christmas rocked around, my daughter sent us a present, a paperback copy of the same book, in which she had written, I've not read it myself, but I've heard good things about it. Let me know how you like it, and if it's any good, I'll borrow it off you. So she's welcome to do that, but I've actually lent it out to someone else right now, so she'll have to wait a wee while, which I'm sure is fine, because she's always got plenty to do. So, did I like it? Honestly, no, not really. I love a fantasy book, which, if you've been on my channel for any length of time, you'll know full well. Dragons, I'm there for dragons. Somehow this one just didn't do it for me. I'm not entirely sure why. Perhaps it's because at the beginning I found myself getting overwhelmed by all of the names and all of the relationships. I thought there were too many characters and I struggled with it, even though I did take some notes, because I learned from having read Game of Thrones that that works for me. Game of Thrones took me 3 goes to get into book 1, but once I was in it I loved it, so it's definitely worth doing. So I did the same thing here, just to try and learn who all the names and relationships were, so that when I came across a name in the next point of view chapter that I hadn't read for a wee while, I wasn't trying to rack my brains and figure out who that was. That might be part of it. And another part of it might be because I listened to a large chunk of it on audiobook. And for some reason at the moment, my audiobook listening comprehension, I've been struggling with that. So as I sit here, you'll see the fencing around me. There's fencing all over there and round the back, and there's a driveway there made of monoblock. And as we were getting into spring, I cleaned it all, power washed it, painted it. It was a lot of manual labour, and normally when I'm doing that kind of thing I will listen to audiobooks and it makes the chores enjoyable. But for some reason with this book it just wasn't going in. And the same thing happened with the next one and the next one, which we'll get to. So for some reason, I don't know if it was just because of the type of work I was doing, or maybe this book spoiled it in some way, I don't know. But that's what happened, and so I did read chunks of it with the physical copy. As I said, I was reading it in bed, and I do like to tandem read as well. But by the time I was getting near the end of it, I was just blasting through it in double speed to get through it, because I didn't want to DNF it, because I don't like DNF and stuff, which I know is silly. And I ended up just not really following what was happening, so perhaps I need to read it again, but I didn't like it well enough to do that, so I don't think that's going to happen. So I gave it 2 stars. It wasn't bad enough for 1. It was well written, and I'm sure well plotted, but yeah, it wasn't for me. So that's 1 of 6. Second book is the one I don't have. I listened to it on audio. I don't even have it on Kindle. It's just solely an audio book. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Now, I knew that there was a great TV show. I'd seen it advertised on streaming services. And I saw a lot of press about the new season coming out, and it looked good. I know Elizabeth Moss from The West Wing, and another show she was in that was set in New Zealand where she was a cop, I think. Can't remember the name of it. Something to do with a lake. Great actress. I really like her work, so I decided with my wife that we would watch first season of Handmaid's Tale, which we did, and we loved it. It was fabulous. And of course, as with Shift, or as with Silo, I decided, having enjoyed the show, I wanted to read the book, so that's what I did. And it was, as I said, another example of an audio book that I listened to while I was doing my chores. And it was another example of an audio book that didn't really sink into my brain properly. Narrated by Elizabeth Moss, which was a treat. It wasn't such a problem, the comprehension thing, because, as I said, I'd watched the TV show, so I knew the plot. The TV show I actually think is better. Sacrilege, I know. And I haven't read the sequel. I do have it, I've got the audiobook of that. I would like to get a physical copy of Handmaid's Tale for the shelf, and the sequel, because they are books I would like to return to, because they're right in my wheelhouse. That kind of dystopian, communist sort of, is it socialist? It's not really socialist as much. More kind of dystopian, communist style society, and yeah, it's right up my street. So I loved the book, although it didn't sink in properly, and I want to return to it at some point with a physical copy. So I think I gave it 4 stars. So why wouldn't I? That was 2. Number 3 is in a similar vein. We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, which I was tickled to learn has an introduction by Margaret Atwood, and I know that this book was an influence on her and also on George Orwell. So this was written, I think, 1929, so we're in Soviet Russia. I mean, heavily Soviet, we're in Stalin's time. This is editing cams. It wasn't written in 1929, it was written in 1920 to 21. Published in Germany, 1924, and not published in Russia until 1988. I should check my notes, shouldn't I? In fact, I should make notes. These details matter. And here's this author bringing out a book that was basically unpublishable in the Soviet Union, and so it wasn't. I don't think it was published there till the 80s. I did know that, and I think I've made note of that in my Substack post, where I went through my wrap-up. I think it was published first in Germany, and then, you know, it became well known throughout the world. It just wasn't published in the Soviet Union. And it follows a character who's a member of this kind of dystopian society that is where everybody lives in glass. He's a scientist, this guy. He's responsible for building a rocket ship. He's one of the lead scientists on that project. In this society, they get tickets to go and have sexy time. There's no love as such. There's no relationships, husband and wife kind of thing. You basically just get a ticket and get assigned someone. And he ends up falling in love. That's really what it's kind of about. And he starts to question the society in which he lives, but it's done in such a clever way. I had the audiobook once again, narrated brilliantly by Toby Jones, who, you know, the little actor from Detectorists, one of my favourite British comedy shows. And also I know him from the Post Office drama that came out a couple of years ago in the UK, which was responsible for actually having that post office scandal with the Horizon system brought into the public domain, and eventually settlements were made I was part of the claim for that as a former sub-postmaster, so when I see Toby Jones, I mean, he didn't write the show, but he was on it, and he played the part of the guy who was responsible for bringing this scandal into the public domain and for getting it all resolved. So Toby Jones, for me, when I listen to him, I love the guy. But again, the audiobook wasn't going in. I was too busy with the painting and the scrubbing and the power washing, and so I read the physical book as well and re-listened to it with the physical book after I'd finished it, and yeah, it's that good a book. I gave it 4 stars. It's delightful. Recommend it to anyone who loves Margaret Atwood or George Orwell or Aldous Huxley, any of those kinds of dystopian novels. We was the first, so you owe it to Zamyatin to read it, and I'm sure if you liked any of those other authors I've just mentioned, you will dig it. So that's 3. Next one. Right. This is a difficult book to review. This is partly why I've waited till the 12th. I want to do a full review of this. Red Star Over Russia by David King. Look at the back there. Isn't that gorgeous? Yeah, it's in shot. A visual history of the Soviet Union from 1917 to the death of Stalin. And it deserves some top-down footage, so I have recorded some and I will include it here. And just keep in mind that I'm intending at some point to do a full review of it, and it's such a daunting task because I could quite literally show you every page because it's that good. It's a selection, a collection of photographs and artwork and posters charting the history of the Soviet Union from its inception right through to, as I said, the death of Stalin. So it doesn't continue, other than one picture of Khrushchev at the end. It doesn't go any further than that. And we get a picture of Stalin lying in his grave. I'm sure I'll have included that in the top down, but in case I didn't, and save me doing it again, there he is, the illustrious leader, Comrade Stalin, who died because he had a stroke, didn't he? But he'd actually killed all of his doctors in his paranoid phase. So by the time he was lying in his room dying, anyway, you can learn about that. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to tell you about the book. It was just as a student of Russian history and Soviet history in particular, and Stalin's era in particular, it was just the most amazing book that I could ever have bought. And I bought it quite a long time ago. This was my second reading. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about this. If you are at all interested in anything to do with the Soviet Union, even if you're a fan of these novels we've just discussed, We and 1984 and Brave New World and Handmaid's Tale, if you're at all interested in that kind of world, this is that world, but in reality. It's just mind-blowing to me that this could have happened. You know, how was it? My dad was born in 1931, and that blows my mind, just the fact that my dad was alive when Stalin was doing his thing. Show trials and purges in the 30s, about 37, 38, the Great Terror. My dad was alive. It would have been reported in the press, or was it? It probably wasn't reported in the press in the West. That just fascinates me. And one of the, well, there are 2 harrowing parts of this, the most difficult parts of the book to look at, which I won't show you. I will include them in my full review, there's a series of mug shots of all of the people, not all the people, some of the most, let's say, important people, most distinguished people that were killed during the Great Terror. And there are descriptions of who they were, what jobs they had, and it's just It's difficult, but it also feels important. It's important that this information is out there in the public domain. And a lot of it I knew because I've read lots of Russian history books, lots of Soviet history books. I know what happened, but to see photographs of actual people that were killed, you know, harrowing. And then the other scenes are of the Great Patriotic War, what the Russians refer to as the Great Patriotic War, which for us in the West is the Second World War, when the Nazis went into Belarus and the atrocities that they perpetrated there. And I knew about it from having just watched a film called Come and See, which is available to watch on YouTube if you want to see it. Would I recommend it? With caveats. I've recommended it to one of my best pals because I think he'll get a lot out of it. It's not an enjoyable film by any stretch, and it follows the story of a young guy in Belarus who joins the partisans to fight against the Nazis as they make their way through Belarus. And yeah, I won't say any more about it, but having just watched that and then to see some of the images in here of what happened, the film shows it in a horrific way, but the pictures, the real pictures, in a lot of ways are more horrific. Yeah. So that's Red Star Over Russia. It doesn't sound like an enjoyable read, does it? But you know, there's a lot more to it than those two things that I've talked about. It's just those are the things that stand out the most in my mind, and as they come near the end of the book as well. It's a book to look through again and again and again, just because it's such an important document. Some people in reviews I've read have issue with the curation, particularly that there are so many images of Trotsky. Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. The guy that has the collection and put this book together, you know, it's his stuff. He can curate it as he sees fit, and I've got no problem with it. I think it's absolutely brilliantly done, and it's a 5-star book. If there were more stars, I would give it to it. So there we go, Red Star Over Russia. Look out for top-down shots. In fact, I'll definitely will have included some in this rambly discussion that I'm having with you. Maybe this will be my review, I don't know. Right, book 5, this is an interesting one. James Kelman, A Disaffection. I'll just bury the lead here and tell you that this is a 5-star book. Actually, not bury the lead, that's what I mean. I read this back when I was in Odessa, 94 to 95, midway through my degree in Russian, and at that time I read a lot. I was borrowing books from the British Council Library. I'd never heard of James Kelman. I must have just seen it on the shelf and decided it sounded good, and it was. Boy oh boy. This was recommended or nominated for the Booker Prize in 1989, as was London Fields, interestingly, which I read about the same time. London Fields by Martin Amis, and I'm going to be reading that later this year. So it was nominated but didn't win the prize. He did win the prize later, I think it was 1994, with another book of his called How Late It Was, How Late, which I've also read a couple of times, and it's also a 5-star book. This one follows the life of a young school teacher, aged 29, in a school in the city of Glasgow. It's written in the Glasgow dialect, and it's set in the late 80s as well. So it's really my area. You know, the teacher's 29 in the late 80s. I was 19, so about 10-year difference. 18, 19. And the dialect, obviously something I can read quite easily. You might have trouble with it if you're not so familiar with the Scottish dialect. If you've watched Trainspotting, you'll have an idea what I'm talking about, although that's more East Coast than West Coast, which for non-Scots isn't really a thing. It's just the Scottish dialect, but when you live here you pick up on the differences between, you know, different towns and cities. Even Ayrshire, where I grew up, about 20 miles south of Glasgow, has a lot of differences, but anyway, it's the Glasgow dialect, or the Scots dialect, and it follows this teacher who's disaffected, hence the title of the book. He's not enjoying his work. He thinks what he's teaching the kids isn't helping them. And we follow his life over 4 days. Just a very, very short slice of life, which seems to be Kelvin's thing. I've only read 2 of his books and they're both very much slice of life, kind of social realism, and it's just fascinating to me. There's a great scene in it where Patrick, he walks out the school where he's supposed to be teaching, and he goes round to his brother's flat, and his brother's got some mates round with a carry-out, which is alcohol, for those that don't know what a carry-out is. A carry-out in Scots, or a cargo in Ayrshire. And they're sitting drinking homebrew, and Patrick goes round, decides he wants to contribute to the cargo, so he goes down to the off-licence, which, if you've never seen an off-licence in Glasgow, it's depicted very, very well. You go in and there are shutters up between the customer space and the shopkeeper space in order to prevent attacks or anyone jumping over to steal bottles or whatever, or tobacco. So your bevy gets handed through a wee hatch, and you pass the money through, like in a bank I suppose, but not glass. It's usually sort of wire mesh. So he goes in and he buys a big cargo, cans of super lager, which is the purple tin. Tennant's Purple Tin, made famous by that band whose name I forgot the name of right now. Nope, can't remember. And a bottle of Scotch whisky. Takes it round to his brothers, and they all sit and they have discussions about stuff, you know, sort of barroom philosophy kind of stuff, talking about politics and society, and it's brilliantly done, and it really, you know, I'm 20 years sober this year because I was like these characters back then, and I'm not now. But it really took me back to those days. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I don't need to glamorise bevy, because I know it's, yeah, I won't go too deep into that. Just bear it in mind that I've got a channel on YouTube that's about my recovery from alcoholism. I know how dangerous a substance it is. So when I was reading that scene, I was like, just transported back to many, many bevy sessions I would have had back then. At the same time, in the late 80s, you know. So well written that I felt like I was there in the room, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but there you go. That's just how well written these books are. And this was very much a mood read. It wasn't on my TBR, I just took a notion for it, found a used copy online and got it ordered up. So that's a Disaffection. It's a 5-star. Is that number 4? No, it's number 5. That means we've only got 1 left. Right, so we talked about my audiobook problem. I was going to drive and I thought, I want an audiobook that I've already listened to and that's going to be easy to listen to. Back when I started the channel, the very first video I made was a book haul video of the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. I've been meaning to read it all, reread it all, since then, so a year and a half ago. I read The Gunslinger again for the 3rd time last year. This month I read The Drawing of the Three, book 2 in Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. And although I had it on the shelf, I did listen to most of it, narrated by Frank Muller. Absolutely loved it. Wow, what a thrill, what a thrill. I finished the last 100 or so pages sitting out here. with the physical copy and the AirPods in, just taking it in. No one writes characters like King. No one. I don't care what you say. The characters in this, so it follows on right from the end of the gunslinger, and Roland's on the beach, Roland the gunslinger, and the lobstrosities come and attack him, these kind of lobster-like creatures that say dada chick, dada chum, funny things like that. Frank Muller says it so well in the narration. He gets some fingers bitten off and he manages to get away and not be killed. And then he sees a door on the beach. Now, if you remember at the end of the gunslinger, it was prophesied that he would have to draw 3, the drawing of the 3. And he was treated to a tarot reading by the Man in Black. So the characters from the tarot reading are who he goes to bring back. And he ends up in our world. Brings back one character who is a drug addict and a drug mule, who's in the employ of a kingpin drug dealer in New York. He's bringing drugs back on a plane, and Roland ends up in his head as he comes through the door on the beach into our world. He ends up in this guy's head and realises that if the guy gets caught, which he's about to be, bringing drugs into the US, then Roland won't be able to draw him for the prophesied adventure that they go on to the Dark Tower. So Roland helps this guy figure out how to get around this problem. So we'll leave that there. And then he draws another character, Odetta Holmes, who has, in the book it's described as schizophrenia. I've read other people say that because of when this was written, is it late 80s, early 90s, it's not quite accurate in terms of mental health diagnoses. It's probably more dissociative identity disorder. So keep that in mind if you're reading this and you're a bit like, oh, that's not quite right. It's of its time. So we've got Odetta Holmes, who is also Odetta Walker. 2 very different characters in one body. So is that the drawing of the 3? Is that 3 people? Well, I won't spoil it for you, but it goes into how these characters all deal with the situations that they're in, so that they can end up in Roland's world to start book 3, which is the Wastelands. It really doesn't move the plot on at all. It's all about these characters and who they are, their backstories, and how they came to be part of Roland's quartet. And I loved it, so I'm really looking forward to reading The Wastelands. That's me. I finally did it. My April wrap-up. How long are we at here? Bloody hell, nearly half an hour, me rambling. So I won't bore you with my TBR, other than to say I'm reading this the now, Oblomov by Goncharov, as part of a read-along on my Substack. I've just got to chapter 9, which is page 110. I'm reading it through May and June, so although I know we're now in the middle of May, and it would be a tall order if you wanted to join. 110 pages to catch up, starting from today. But boy oh boy am I getting a lot out of this. This is my 3rd time reading this novel. It's a translation I haven't read before by Stephen Pearl, which came out in 2004, I think. And this edition here, Alma Classics, came out in 2016. I might have got the dates slightly wrong, but I think that's right. And it's such a smooth translation. And the chapter I've just discussed, chapter 8, goes into so much about how one deals with procrastination and lack of motivation. It's very kind of neurodiverse, and this was published in 1859, long before we ever knew about autism or ADHD or any other executive dysfunction disorders. So it's illuminating, it's eye-opening, and it's so damn relatable. You know, right now, 2025, reading a book from back then that it just is brilliant. So if you want to join that, there's a link below.